Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Christopher Hernandez and I am 45 years old. I've been a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park for 22 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Amanda Stewart turned into something that still haunts me. And it all started when I found a child in the wilderness who claimed to be lost, but whose eyes held the darkness of something far older and more evil than any human soul. The radio crackled to life at 4:17 p.m. on November 3rd, just as the late autumn sun was beginning its rapid descent behind the Teton Range. I was completing my patrol near the Lamar Valley when dispatch came through with an urgent code red, missing child, separated from family during a hiking expedition in the backcountry. Ranger Hernandez, we have a critical situation. 8-year-old Amanda Stewart became separated from her family approximately 3 hours ago near Specimen Ridge. Family was hiking the Fossil Forest Trail when the child wandered off during a rest stop. Temperature dropping rapidly. Forecast shows snow tonight. This is now a priority search and rescue. I keyed my radio immediately, my heart rate spiking. Missing child cases were every ranger's worst nightmare, especially this late in the season when Yellowstone's backcountry became a death trap for the unprepared. Copy that. Dispatch. ETA to Specimen Ridge staging area 15 minutes. Have we initiated full SAR protocols? Affirmative. Multiple ranger units en route. Helicopter on standby. Family is on scene and providing details. Child was wearing a bright red jacket and blue jeans, has no survival experience. Parents are distraught. As I drove toward the staging area, the familiar weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. In 22 years of park service, I'd been involved in dozens of child search operations. Most ended well. Kids were curious and wandered off but stayed close to trails. But some ended in ways that haunted me for years afterward. The Specimen Ridge area was particularly dangerous. It was riddled with thermal features, steep drop-offs, and wildlife corridors used by bears preparing for winter hibernation. An 8-year-old alone out there had maybe 2 hours before hypothermia set in, assuming she didn't fall into a thermal pool or encounter a grizzly first. I arrived at the staging area to find controlled chaos. 3 ranger vehicles, a search and rescue trailer, and a family huddled around a picnic table looking devastated. Robert and Michelle Stewart were both in their late 30s, clearly outdoor enthusiasts based on their high-quality gear, but their faces showed the raw terror that only parents of a missing child could understand. "Thank God," Michelle Stewart said as I approached, her voice cracking with emotion. "Are you leading the search? We need to find Amanda before dark. She's just a little girl, she doesn't know how to survive out here." I knelt down to their level, speaking in the calm, reassuring tone I'd perfected over 2 decades. "We're going to find her. Tell me exactly what happened, every detail you can remember." Robert Stewart wiped his eyes and took a shaky breath. "We were about 2 miles up the Fossil Forest Trail, taking a water break near the big boulder outcropping. Amanda was playing with some rocks she'd collected, staying right next to us. Michelle and I were looking at the map, planning our route back, and when we looked up, she was gone." "How long between when you last saw her and when you realized she was missing?" "Maybe 5 minutes," Michelle said. "We called for her immediately and searched the immediate area for over an hour before hiking back to get help. We followed every game trail, checked behind every boulder. It's like she just vanished." Something about their story didn't sit right with me. 8-year-olds didn't typically wander far from their parents, especially not in unfamiliar terrain, and experienced hikers like the Stewarts wouldn't normally lose track of their child for 5 full minutes. Did Amanda seem upset about anything? Was she acting differently today? The parents exchanged a glance that lasted just a split second too long. "She's been having some behavioral issues lately," Robert admitted reluctantly. "Nightmares, talking to imaginary friends, sudden mood swings. Our pediatrician said it was probably just a phase, but what?" Michelle's voice dropped to a whisper. She's been saying things, disturbing things, about wanting to hurt people, about voices telling her to do bad things. We thought getting her out in nature might help. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. Children who exhibited sudden behavioral changes and claimed to hear voices were often troubled in ways that went beyond normal childhood development. "We need to find her before dark," I said, standing and shouldering my pack. "I'm going to follow her trail from the last known location. The other rangers will set up a perimeter and check all the obvious hiding spots." The hike to the boulder outcropping took 30 minutes in the fading light. The stewards had given me a detailed description of the location, and I found their rest spot easily. Water bottles, energy bar wrappers, and small indentations in the dirt where they'd sat. But there was no sign of Amanda Stewart. I examined the area methodically, looking for any trace of an 8-year-old's passage. No footprints in the dirt, no disturbed vegetation, no dropped items. It was as if she had simply evaporated. That's when I heard the singing. It was coming from somewhere deeper in the forest, a child's voice carrying a melody I didn't recognize. But there was something wrong with the tune. It was in a minor key, discordant and unsettling, more like a funeral dirge than anything a child would sing. I followed the sound through dense lodgepole pine forest, my flashlight beam cutting through the growing darkness. The singing grew louder as I approached, and I could make out words now, though they weren't in English. The language sounded old, guttural, like something from a dead civilization. I found her in a small clearing about half a mile from where she'd gone missing. Amanda Stewart was sitting cross-legged in the exact center of the clearing, still wearing her bright red jacket. She appeared to be unharmed, but something was fundamentally wrong with the scene. The ground around her was perfectly circular and completely bare. No grass, no fallen leaves, no vegetation of any kind. Just dark, scorched earth that looked like it had been burned by intense heat. "Amanda?" I called out softly, not wanting to startle her. "Amanda, my name is Ranger Hernandez. Your parents are looking for you." She stopped singing and turned to look at me. What I saw in the beam of my flashlight made my blood run cold. Amanda Stewart's eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils. The entire eye from edge to edge was the color of coal. And when she smiled at me, I could see that her teeth had changed too. They were too sharp, too numerous, arranged in multiple rows like a shark's. "Hello, Ranger," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that no 8-year-old throat should be able to produce. "I've been waiting for you. Amanda, you've been missing for hours. Your parents are worried sick. We need to get you back to them." She tilted her head with an expression of innocent curiosity that was utterly terrifying, given her transformed appearance. "Amanda isn't here anymore. She's sleeping deep inside, where the darkness is warm and comfortable." "What do you mean? Who are you?" "I am Malphus, Legion of the 39, Prince of the Lower Dominions." The voice coming from Amanda's mouth dropped to a register that vibrated in my chest. "I have claimed this vessel for my own purposes. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't abandon a child no matter what was happening to her. Listen, whatever you are, Amanda is just a little girl. Let her go." The thing wearing Amanda's face laughed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with the screams of the damned. She called to me. Night after night she prayed for the power to hurt the ones who hurt her. She invited me in willingly. "That's impossible. Children don't summon demons. Children are the easiest to influence," it said, rising to its feet with movements that were too fluid, too graceful for a human child. "Their minds are malleable, their spirits unguarded. All it takes is pain, fear, and a desire for revenge." I slowly reached for my radio, trying not to make any sudden movements. "What kind of pain?" Amanda's face twisted into an expression of pure malice. "The uncle who visits at night. The teachers who ignore her pleas for help. The parents who refuse to believe her stories." She suffered in silence until I offered her a solution. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. Amanda Stewart hadn't wandered off during a family hike. She'd been systematically abused, and in her desperation she'd somehow opened herself to demonic possession. "I can help her," I said, though I had no idea how. There are people who specialize in this kind of thing. She doesn't have to stay trapped. She doesn't want to be free, the demon said, taking a step closer. She enjoys the power I give her. Watch. The creature raised Amanda's small hand, and every tree in the clearing began to wither and die. The bark cracked and peeled away. The branches twisted into tortured shapes, and the leaves turned black and fell like rain. The temperature in the clearing dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Impressive, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But that kind of power comes with a price. What does she have to give you in return? Her soul, of course, and soon yours as well. The demon gestured with Amanda's hand, and I felt an overwhelming compulsion to step forward into the scorched circle. My legs moved against my will, carrying me closer to the possessed child despite every fiber of my being screaming to run. You cannot resist, it said with Amanda's voice. I am older than your species, more powerful than your comprehension. You will join the collection. What collection? The demon smiled, and Amanda's face began to change. For a moment I saw other faces superimposed over hers, adult faces, screaming in terror and agony. The faces of other people the demon had possessed and consumed over the centuries. Every soul I claim becomes part of my legion. They remain conscious, aware, but completely under my control. Amanda will watch as I use her body to commit unspeakable acts, and she will be powerless to stop me. I was almost within arm's reach of the demon now, my feet moving steadily forward despite my desperate attempts to stop. But as I got closer, I noticed something that gave me hope. There were tears streaming down Amanda's face. The demon might be in control of her body and voice, but some part of the real Amanda was still fighting, still aware of what was happening. And if she was still in there, maybe she could be saved. Amanda, I said, speaking directly to the child and ignoring the demon. Amanda, if you can hear me, I want you to know that what happened to you wasn't your fault. The people who hurt you are the ones who should be punished, not you. The demon's expression faltered for just a moment, and I saw confusion flicker across Amanda's features. Amanda, you don't have to carry this burden alone. There are people who will believe you, who will protect you, who will make sure the bad people can't hurt you anymore. Silence, the demon roared, but its voice was weaker now, less certain. You're just a little girl who got scared and made a mistake, I continued, now close enough to see the real Amanda's eyes behind the demonic black. But it's not too late to fix it. You can send this thing away. She cannot, the demon snarled. The pact is sealed in blood and suffering. She belongs to me now. But Amanda's lips were moving, forming words that the demon wasn't speaking. I could barely hear her whisper, "Help me." I made my decision. I reached into my pack and pulled out a small silver cross my grandmother had given me years ago. I'd worn it every day of my career, though I'd never had occasion to use it for anything like this. By the power of all that is good and holy, I said, pressing the cross against Amanda's forehead, I command you to release this child. The demon screamed, a sound that shattered the windows of my soul. Amanda's body convulsed, levitating several feet off the ground as dark energy crackled around her like black lightning. You cannot banish me, the demon shrieked. She invited me in. Maybe she did, I said, holding the cross steady despite the burning pain shooting up my arm. But she was a scared child who didn't understand what she was doing. And now she wants you gone. Amanda's voice, her real voice, joined mine. Go away, I don't want you anymore, leave me alone. The demon's hold on her began to weaken. The black faded from her eyes, her teeth returned to normal, and her body slowly descended to the ground. But as it lost control, the creature made one last desperate attempt to claim a victim. Dark tendrils erupted from Amanda's body, reaching for me with deadly intent. I felt them wrap around my throat, cutting off my air supply and filling my mind with visions of torture and damnation. But Amanda Stewart was stronger than the demon had anticipated. Even as it tried to kill me, she was fighting back, using every ounce of her will to protect the person who had tried to save her. No, she screamed, and a burst of pure white light erupted from her chest. The demon was torn from her body with a shriek, that echoed across the entire valley. I watched as a writhing mass of shadow and hate was dragged screaming back to whatever hell it had crawled out of. Amanda collapsed to the ground, unconscious but breathing. The scorched earth around her began to return to normal, grass sprouting and flowers blooming as if spring had suddenly arrived in the middle of autumn. I gathered the unconscious child in my arms and carried her back to the staging area, where her parents were waiting with a medical team. Amanda was taken to a hospital in Bozeman, where doctors found evidence of long-term sexual abuse but no physical explanation for what had happened in the forest. The investigation that followed revealed that Amanda's uncle had been molesting her for over 2 years, and that her behavioral changes had been a desperate cry for help that no adult had recognized. He was arrested and convicted, and Amanda was placed in therapy with specialists who understood both trauma and the supernatural. I never told anyone the complete truth about what happened in that clearing. How could I explain that an 8-year-old girl had been possessed by a demon and nearly killed me before finding the strength to save us both? Who would believe such a story? But Amanda remembered everything. She wrote me a letter 6 months later, thanking me for helping her send the bad thing away. She said she was doing better, that the nightmares had stopped, and that she was learning to trust adults again. She also said she could still sense other children who were struggling with similar darkness, and that she wanted to help them when she got older. I kept that letter, and I think about Amanda Stewart every time I patrol the backcountry of Yellowstone. She taught me that monsters aren't always the supernatural creatures we fear in the dark. Sometimes they're the humans who hurt innocent children and drive them to desperate measures. But she also taught me that even in the deepest darkness, even when evil seems to have won, the human spirit can still fight back. An 8-year-old girl found the courage to banish a demon that had claimed countless souls over the centuries. If she could do that, then maybe there's hope for all of us. My name is Christopher Hernandez, and I've been a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park for 22 years. I've seen many things in these mountains that can't be explained by science or reason, but the most terrifying thing I ever encountered wasn't a demon or a monster. It was the realization that the real evil in this world comes from the people who are supposed to protect our children, and that sometimes those children have no choice but to make deals with darkness just to survive. Amanda Stewart is 18 now, studying psychology and social work. She still writes to me occasionally, telling me about the other children she's helped, the ones who were trapped in similar situations. She's dedicated her life to making sure no child ever has to face that kind of evil alone. The demon is gone, banished back to whatever hell spawned it. But the humans who created the conditions that allowed it to possess an innocent child are still out there, still hurting other children, still driving them toward the darkness. That's the real horror story, and it's one that repeats itself every day in every community, in ways both supernatural and mundane. We failed Amanda Stewart long before any demon ever touched her soul. The question is, how many other children are we failing right now? My name is Sarah Rodriguez, and I am 29 years old. I've been a park ranger at Grand Canyon National Park for 5 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Thomas Anderson turned into something that still haunts me. The emergency call came through at 4:13 p.m. on October 28th, just as the autumn sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the canyon walls. I was finishing my afternoon patrol near the south rim, when dispatch crackled through with the urgency that every ranger knows means someone's life is hanging in the balance. Ranger Rodriguez, we have a code yellow. Missing person on the Bright Angel Trail, last seen yesterday morning. The Bright Angel Trail is one of the most popular and well-maintained routes into the Grand Canyon, but it's also one of the most dangerous for unprepared hikers. The descent looks easy. It's the climb back up that kills people. October temperatures could still reach 90 degrees at the bottom, while the rim might be freezing. Dehydration, heat exhaustion, and heart attacks claimed lives every year. The missing person was Thomas Anderson, a 42-year-old accountant from Phoenix who'd been attempting his first rim-to-river hike. His wife, Susan Anderson, had reported him missing when he failed to return to their hotel as planned. She met me at the Bright Angel trailhead, her face pale with worry and exhaustion. Tom left yesterday at 6 a.m., she said, showing me his hiking permit and trail map. He was supposed to be back by 6 p.m. at the latest. He's not an experienced hiker, but he researched everything, brought all the right gear. He wouldn't just disappear. I reviewed Thomas's permit while Susan provided more details. He'd planned a challenging but doable day hike, down to the Colorado River and back up about 16 miles total with significant elevation change. Ambitious for a beginner, but not impossible with proper preparation and conditioning. Did he mention meeting anyone else on the trail? Any other hikers he might have partnered with? Susan shook her head. Tom prefers to hike alone, says it helps him think, decompress from work stress, but he's careful, always follows the rules, always checks in when he's supposed to. I studied his planned route more carefully. The Bright Angel Trail was well marked and regularly patrolled, but it was also 14 miles round trip to the river with over 4,000 feet of elevation change. In October heat, that could be deadly for someone not properly conditioned. I'll start the search immediately, I told Susan. We have rescue teams trained specifically for canyon emergencies. We'll find him. But as I began my descent into the canyon, I had a feeling this wouldn't be a standard heat exhaustion case. The Bright Angel Trail begins at the south rim and zigzags down through geological layers that represent millions of years of Earth's history. It's beautiful but unforgiving. Every step down means a step you'll have to climb back up, and the canyon has a way of making people overestimate their abilities and underestimate the challenge. I started my search at 5:30 p.m., following Thomas's planned route. The upper sections of the trail were busy with day hikers and tourists, but as I descended deeper, the crowds thinned out. By the time I reached the 3-mile rest house, I was essentially alone with the canyon. At the rest house, I found the first sign of Thomas. A day hiker coming up from Phantom Ranch mentioned seeing a middle-aged man in a red hiking shirt sitting at the rest house around noon the previous day, looking exhausted and drinking heavily from his water bottles. He seemed okay, the hiker told me. Tired, but that's normal for this trail. Said he was taking a break before continuing down to the river. That timing put Thomas on schedule for his planned hike. If he'd continued from the rest house to the river, he should have reached the Colorado by early afternoon, giving him plenty of time to rest and begin the climb back up before dark. But something had gone wrong between the rest house and the river. I continued down the trail, now actively searching for signs of Thomas. The Bright Angel Trail is well maintained, but there are plenty of places where an inexperienced hiker could get into trouble. Side trails that lead nowhere, unstable rock formations, areas where the main trail becomes confusing. At 6:45 p.m., I reached Indian Garden, an oasis in the desert where cottonwood trees grow around a natural spring. This was a common rest stop for hikers, and I hoped to find more recent information about Thomas's passage. But the campground was nearly empty, just a few backpackers setting up for the night. I spoke with the campers, but none of them had seen Thomas. That was strange. Indian Garden was directly on his planned route, and any hiker attempting the rim-to-river trail would have passed through here. Either Thomas had taken a different route, or something had happened to him before he reached this point. That's when I noticed the tracks. In the sandy area near the spring, I found boot prints that could have been Thomas's. Size 10 hiking boots, moderate wear pattern, heading toward the Colorado River. But there were other tracks mixed in with his, and these didn't look right. They were roughly human-shaped but wrong somehow. Too long, with claw marks where toes should be, and the gait pattern suggested something that was trying to walk upright but wasn't naturally built for it. The tracks paralleled Thomas's for about 50 yards before disappearing on the rocky trail. I'd worked at Grand Canyon for 5 years and seen every type of wildlife track in the desert. These didn't match anything in my experience. Not coyote, not mountain lion, not bighorn sheep. They looked almost human but distorted, like someone had stretched and twisted a human foot into something else. Base, this is Rodriguez. I'm at Indian Garden following the subject's trail. Found some unusual sign that might indicate wildlife activity. Continuing search toward the river. Copy, Rodriguez. What type of wildlife activity? I looked at the strange tracks again, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Unknown at this time. Possibly a large predator, but the tracks don't match known species in the area. I followed the combined trail toward the Colorado River, now more concerned about what Thomas might have encountered than simple heat exhaustion or dehydration. The canyon was home to dangerous wildlife, rattlesnakes, scorpions, mountain lions, but nothing that would leave tracks like these. The trail descended through increasingly dramatic scenery as the sun set behind the rim, casting the canyon walls in deep red and orange light. Beautiful but also ominous. Darkness came quickly in the canyon and temperature drops could be severe. At 7:30 p.m., I reached the Colorado River and found Thomas's second campsite. His day pack was sitting on the beach beside the river, perfectly arranged as if he'd set it down for a rest break. His water bottles were empty, and his trail snacks were gone, normal signs of a long day hike. But Thomas himself was nowhere to be found. I examined the area more carefully. The sand around his pack was disturbed, but not in the way you'd expect from someone taking a rest break. It looked like there had been a struggle. Scuff marks, disturbed rocks, and those same strange tracks I'd found at Indian Garden. But there was something else. In the sand near Thomas's pack, I found tracks that were definitely human, but they didn't match Thomas's boots. These were bare feet, human-sized, but with an odd shape to the toes. And they led away from the river, back up toward the canyon walls. "Thomas!" I called out, my voice echoing off the rock formations. "Thomas Anderson, Park Service." No response. Just the sound of the Colorado River flowing past and the wind whistling through the canyon. I followed the barefoot tracks away from the river, using my flashlight to illuminate the trail. They led to a narrow side canyon that wasn't on any tourist maps, a place where flash floods had carved a deep channel through the rock. The tracks disappeared into this canyon, and I could hear something moving in the darkness ahead. "Thomas, if you can hear me, call out." A voice answered from deep in the side canyon. "Help me, please, I'm hurt." It sounded like Thomas, but something was wrong with his voice. The words were clear, but the tone was flat, emotionless, like someone reading from a script rather than genuinely calling for help. I entered the side canyon cautiously, flashlight beam dancing across the narrow walls. The space was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for one person, with smooth rock surfaces carved by centuries of flash floods. Perfect place for an ambush. "Keep talking so I can find you," I called out. "Over here. I fell and hurt my leg." The voice was coming from around a bend in the canyon ahead. But as I got closer, I realized something that made my blood freeze. The voice was too consistent. The same words, the same inflection, like a recording being played on repeat. I rounded the bend and found Thomas Anderson. He was sitting against the canyon wall, his red hiking shirt torn and dirty, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. But something was wrong with his appearance. His skin looked waxy and pale, his eyes were too bright, and when he smiled at me, his teeth seemed too sharp. "Thank you for coming," he said, and his voice still had that flat, emotionless quality. "I've been waiting for you." "Thomas? Are you hurt?" "I'm here to help you." He stood up smoothly despite the supposedly broken leg. No pain, no difficulty, just a fluid motion that didn't match someone who'd been injured. "Oh, I'm not Thomas anymore. Thomas was useful, but I think you'll be even more useful." That's when I realized I wasn't looking at Thomas Anderson. I was looking at something wearing Thomas's face. The transformation was subtle at first, just small changes in posture and expression. But as I watched, the creature's features began to shift. Thomas's face melted and reformed, becoming longer and more angular. His eyes turned completely black and his fingernails extended into claws. "What are you?" I asked, backing away and reaching for my radio. "Skinwalker," it said, and now its voice was completely different, raspy and inhuman. "Shapeshifter, hunter. I have walked these canyons since before your people came to this land, wearing the faces of the dead, hunting the living. I'd heard stories about skinwalkers from Navajo rangers, but I'd always assumed they were folklore, cultural traditions passed down through generations. The idea that something could actually steal human appearance and use it as a disguise seemed impossible. But here it was, standing in front of me, wearing Thomas Anderson's stolen face. Where's the real Thomas? The skinwalker smiled with Thomas's mouth, but the expression was predatory and wrong. Gone. Consumed. His form is mine now. His memories are mine to access. I know about his wife Susan, his job in Phoenix, his fear of heights that made him choose this trail over the more challenging routes. It began walking toward me, moving with an unnatural gait that reminded me of the tracks I'd found. And now I'll learn about you, Sarah Rodriguez. 5 years as a park ranger, specialized training in canyon rescue operations, no family to miss you immediately. Perfect for my purposes. I backed away, but the narrow canyon gave me nowhere to run. The creature was between me and the exit, and the walls were too steep to climb. I was trapped with something that had killed at least one person and was planning to make me its next victim. You can't run forever, Sarah, it said, tilting Thomas's head at an impossible angle. This is my territory. I know every trail, every hiding place, every way in and out. You are alone in the darkness with a predator that has hunted these lands for centuries. The skinwalker lunged at me with inhuman speed, claws extended. I dove to the side, pressing myself against the canyon wall and pulling out my emergency flare gun. The creature's claws scraped against rock where I'd been standing, gouging deep furrows in the stone. Clever, it said, straightening Thomas's stolen body. But that toy won't save you. I've survived lightning strikes, flash floods, and attacks from your kind's weapons. What makes you think you can? I fired the flare directly at its chest. The projectile burst into brilliant white light, and the creature shrieked. Not with Thomas's voice, but with something that sounded like wind through broken stone. The light seemed to burn it, forcing it back several steps and causing Thomas's stolen features to flicker and distort. But the effect was temporary. The skinwalker recovered quickly, though I could see anger in its stolen eyes. That hurt, it admitted, but pain is temporary. Hunger is eternal. I had 2 more flares in my emergency kit, but I needed a better strategy. The skinwalker was faster and stronger than me, and it knew the terrain better. But it had also revealed a weakness. Bright light caused it pain and seemed to disrupt its shape-shifting abilities. I fired the second flare at the canyon wall above its head. The magnesium projectile struck the rock and bounced, creating multiple points of burning light that reflected off the smooth stone surfaces. The skinwalker stumbled, covering its face with clawed hands. Too bright, it hissed. Turn it off. That's when I realized what I needed to do. The side canyon was like a natural funnel, and the smooth walls would reflect and amplify any light source. If I could create enough illumination, I might be able to trap the creature in a prison of reflected light. I pulled out my third and final flare, along with my high-intensity emergency flashlight and my backup LED headlamp. 3 light sources, positioned to reflect off the canyon walls, might be enough to overwhelm the skinwalker's ability to function. You're only delaying the inevitable, the creature said, still shielding its face from the burning flare. When your lights fade, I'll still be here, and I'll make your death much slower for this inconvenience. Maybe, I said, activating all my light sources and positioning them to create maximum reflection. But I don't think you're as powerful as you pretend to be. I think you're just a scavenger, feeding on isolated victims who can't fight back. The combined illumination turned the narrow canyon into a blazing corridor of reflected light. The skinwalker screamed and collapsed, its stolen human form beginning to melt away. I could see its true shape underneath, something skeletal and insectoid with too many joints and limbs that bent in impossible directions. But even as it writhed in the burning light, it spoke with Thomas's voice. The other will come when they sense my death. Others? We are not alone in these canyons. Many of us. Hunting. Always hunting. The creature's form collapsed completely, dissolving into something that looked like shadow and dust. The lights continued burning for several more minutes before the flare finally died out, leaving me alone in the canyon with my flashlight and headlamp. I waited another hour before moving, making sure the skinwalker was truly dead. Then I carefully made my way back to the Colorado River and Thomas's abandoned day pack. There was no sign of the real Thomas Anderson. The skinwalker had told the truth about consuming its victims completely. I hiked back up the Bright Angel Trail through the night, reaching the rim at dawn. The search and rescue teams were already preparing for a major operation, but I had to tell them there would be no rescue. Thomas Anderson was dead, killed by something that didn't belong in any ranger manual. The official report listed Thomas as missing, presumed dead due to a fall or medical emergency. His body was never recovered, which wasn't unusual in the Grand Canyon. The terrain could hide evidence forever. Susan Anderson eventually returned to Phoenix, and the case was closed after 6 months. But I knew the truth, and I knew the skinwalker had mentioned others. Over the next few months, I researched every missing person case in Grand Canyon's history, looking for patterns that might indicate supernatural predation. What I found was disturbing. Dozens of cases where experienced hikers had simply vanished, often in areas where they should have been easily found. I also reached out to Navajo rangers and tribal elders, asking about skinwalker traditions. What I learned made me request a transfer to a different park. According to the stories, skinwalkers were once human, medicine men or women who had turned to dark magic, transforming themselves into shape-shifting predators that fed on human flesh and life force. But the most disturbing part of the legends was that skinwalkers could create others like themselves. If enough people went missing in the same area, if enough victims were consumed and their forms stolen, a single skinwalker could spawn an entire pack of creatures. 3 months after the Thomas Anderson incident, I transferred to Arches National Park in Utah. Smaller, fewer visitors, less isolation. But I kept monitoring missing person reports from Grand Canyon, and the pattern was troubling. Disappearances were increasing, especially in the remote areas of the North Rim. I still work as a park ranger, but now I carry more than standard equipment. Extra batteries for my lights, multiple flare guns, and emergency beacons that can signal for help even in the deepest canyons. Because I know that somewhere in the vast wilderness of Grand Canyon, there are things hunting humans. Creatures that can wear our faces and use our voices to lure new victims into their territory. The skinwalker I killed had been right about one thing. They're not alone in those canyons. And every missing person case, every hiker who vanishes without a trace, might be feeding something that grows stronger with each victim. Susan Anderson still sends me Christmas cards, thanking me for trying to find her husband. She doesn't know that I did find him, or rather, the thing that had killed him and stolen his appearance. Some truths are too terrible to share with grieving families. But other rangers need to know. The wilderness isn't just dangerous because of natural hazards. It's dangerous because there are predators hiding in the remote places, creatures that can mimic human form and human behavior well enough to walk among us until they're ready to hunt again. The Grand Canyon keeps its secrets well, but some of those secrets have teeth and claws in the faces of people who thought they were safe on well-marked trails. I hope the lights I carry will be enough if I ever encounter another skinwalker, but I also hope I never have to find out. Because in 5 years of canyon rescue work, I learned that some people who go missing in the wilderness don't want to be found. They're too busy hunting the next group of hikers who think they're safe because they're following the rules. The shapeshifters are patient and they're clever and they're always hungry. And every face they steal makes them harder to identify, harder to track, and harder to stop. The canyon remembers everything, including the faces of the dead. My name is Jennifer Williams and I am 31 years old. I've been a park ranger at Grand Canyon National Park for 7 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Sarah Martinez turned into something that still haunts me. The Hopi ranger who worked the Eastern District had warned me about the old woman 3 weeks before everything went to hell. Joseph Yazzie was nearing retirement, a man who'd spent 40 years walking these canyon trails and had seen things that most people wouldn't believe. There's something wrong in the Hermit Creek area, he told me over coffee at the ranger station. The elders from the reservation have been talking. They say there's a skinwalker active in that part of the canyon. I'd heard the stories before. Navajo legends about witches who could take the form of animals, usually coyotes or wolves. Joseph was half Hopi, half Navajo, and he took the old belief seriously. But I was a college-educated park ranger from Phoenix, and I believed in things I could see and measure. Come on, Joseph. You know there's no such thing as... Don't. His voice was sharp, cutting me off. Don't say the word, Jennifer. Not here, not ever. Some things you don't name unless you want them to notice you. He leaned forward, his dark eyes serious. I'm telling you this because you're good people, and because you work alone too much. There's an old woman been seen in the Hermit Creek area, hiking by herself, which is strange enough. But the weird part is, she's been seen in places where no old woman should be able to go. Cliff faces, narrow ledges, places that would challenge an experienced rock climber. Maybe it's just a very athletic senior citizen. Joseph shook his head. The hikers who've seen her say she moves wrong, like she's not used to walking on two legs. And her eyes. He paused, choosing his words carefully. They say her eyes reflect light in the dark, like an animal's. I filed Joseph's warning away as superstition and went about my regular duties. October was a busy time at the Grand Canyon. The summer crowds had thinned, but the fall weather brought its own surge of visitors. The temperatures were perfect for hiking, and the autumn light made the canyon walls glow like they were on fire. That's when Sarah Martinez went missing. 28 years old, a nurse from Albuquerque, Sarah had come to the Grand Canyon for a solo hiking trip. She was an experienced hiker, well prepared, with a detailed itinerary that she'd filed with the Park Service. She planned to hike the Hermit Trail down to the Colorado River, camp overnight at Hermit Rapids, then return the next day. When she didn't check in at the scheduled time, I organized a search. Sarah's car was still in the Hermit's Rest parking area, and her permit indicated she should have been back by noon. It was now approaching sunset, and the canyon was about to become a very dangerous place for someone alone in the dark. I took my partner, Rex, a German shepherd trained in search and rescue, and started down the Hermit Trail. The trail was steep and rocky, winding down through layers of geological time toward the river far below. In the fading light, the canyon walls looked like the ribs of some enormous dead creature. Rex picked up Sarah's scent trail easily enough. She'd definitely come this way. But about halfway down the trail, something strange happened. Rex stopped, whined, and started backing away from the trail edge. He was staring at something on the rocks below, his hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I followed his gaze and saw her, an old woman, sitting on a narrow ledge about 50 feet down a sheer cliff face. She was wearing a traditional Navajo dress and had long gray hair that hung loose around her shoulders. She appeared to be in her 70s or 80s, but she was sitting in a place that would have been impossible for someone her age to reach. "Ma'am," I called out, "are you all right? Do you need assistance?" The old woman turned to look up at me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Even at that distance, I could see her eyes clearly, yellow like a coyote's, and they seemed to glow in the dim light. She smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too white. "I'm fine, child," she called back, her voice carrying clearly despite the distance. "Just watching, always watching. How did you get down there?" "The same way I'll get back up. The same way I go everywhere I need to go. I tried to radio for a technical rescue team, but my radio was dead. Not even static, just silence. The canyon could be tricky for radio communications, but I'd never had a complete failure before." Rex was still growling, and now he was backing away from the cliff edge entirely. I'd never seen him act like this before. He was a brave dog, trained to work in dangerous situations, but something about the old woman had him terrified. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay right there. I'm calling for help to get you back up safely." The old woman laughed, a sound like wind whistling through stone. "Oh, child, you have no idea what you're dealing with, do you?" And then she was gone, not climbing away, not moving along the ledge, just gone, as if she'd vanished into the rock itself. I stared at the empty ledge, my heart pounding, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Rex whined and pressed against my leg, eager to continue down the trail and away from this place. I decided to focus on finding Sarah Martinez. The old woman was probably just a hallucination brought on by stress and the strange light of the canyon at sunset. We continued down the hermit trail as darkness fell. I used my headlamp to follow Sarah's footprints in the sandy patches of trail, but about 3 miles down, something strange happened. The footprints changed. Sarah had been wearing standard hiking boots with a distinctive tread pattern, but suddenly, the prints became something else entirely. Bare feet with long toes that ended in what looked like claws. The prints were the same size as Sarah's boots, but the shape was completely different. "That's impossible," I whispered to myself. People didn't just change shoe types in the middle of a hike, especially not to bare feet on the Rocky Canyon Trail. Rex sniffed the new prints and immediately started whining again. His body language said he wanted to turn around and get out of there, but I forced him to continue tracking. Sarah Martinez was somewhere down here, possibly injured, and it was my job to find her. The prints led off the main trail onto a narrow side path that wound deeper into the canyon. I'd hiked this area before, but never at night, and the shadows seemed to move independently of my headlamp beam. Every sound echoed strangely off the canyon walls. My footsteps, Rex's panting, the distant murmur of the Colorado River far below. That's when I heard the howling. It started low and mournful, like a coyote calling to its pack. But as it continued, it became something else. A sound that was partly animal, partly human, and completely wrong. Rex froze, his entire body trembling, and refused to take another step. The howling came again, closer this time, and I realized it was coming from multiple directions, as if whatever was making the sound was moving impossibly fast, circling us in the darkness. I drew my sidearm and tried the radio again, still dead. "Sarah," I called out. "Sarah Martinez, if you can hear me, call out." The response came from directly above me, on a cliff face that should have been impossible to climb. "She can't answer you, Ranger. She's busy learning to hunt." I looked up and saw the old woman again, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her, crouched on the narrow rock ledge like an animal, was a figure in hiking clothes. Even in the dim light of my headlamp, I could see it was Sarah Martinez. But Sarah was wrong. She was moving like the old woman had described, like someone not used to walking on 2 legs. Her back was arched, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, and when she looked down at me, her eyes reflected my light like mirrors. "What did you do to her?" I shouted. The old woman laughed. "I gave her a gift, child, the gift of the hunt, the gift of the wild. She's one of us now." "Sarah, Sarah, can you hear me?" Sarah opened her mouth and howled, the same inhuman sound I'd been hearing. But there were words buried in the howl, distorted but recognizable. "Help. Me. Can't. Stop." "You see," the old woman continued, "your friend wandered into our territory. She was camping by the river when we found her, so young, so vital, so perfect for the transformation. It took 3 days, but she fought beautifully. I raised my gun, but they were too far away, too high up on the cliff face. Let her go." "Oh, but we can't do that. You see, she's family now, and family stays together." The old woman's form began to shimmer and change, her human shape flowing like water. "Besides, we're still hungry." What had been an old woman moments before was now a massive coyote, easily twice the size of any normal animal. Its eyes glowed yellow in the darkness, and its teeth were like ivory daggers. Beside it, Sarah Martinez was changing too, her human form twisting and reshaping into something with 4 legs and a long snout full of razor-sharp teeth. They leaped from the cliff face with impossible grace, landing silently on the trail just 20 feet away from me. Rex bolted, running back up the trail toward the rim, abandoning me to face the creatures alone. I fired 3 shots at the thing that had been the old woman, but the bullets seemed to pass right through it. The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and began to circle me. "Iron cannot harm us, child. We are beyond your mortal weapons now." The Sarah thing was circling me from the other direction, moving with predatory grace. When she spoke, her voice was distorted, barely human. "Jennifer, run, while you still can. Sarah, fight it, you're still human. You can beat this." "No," the old woman creature snarled. "She is ours now, and soon you will be too." They attacked simultaneously, moving faster than anything had a right to move. I dove off the trail, rolling down a steep slope of loose rock and sand. Sharp stones tore at my clothes and skin, but I kept rolling, trying to put distance between myself and the creatures. I crashed into a boulder at the bottom of the slope and lay there, stunned and bleeding. Above me, I could hear the creatures howling in frustration, but they seemed unable or unwilling to follow me down the slope. "You cannot run forever, child," the old woman's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "We know these rocks, these trails, these shadows. This is our home, and you are just food that has not yet been caught." I struggled to my feet and began moving deeper into the canyon, using my headlamp to navigate the treacherous terrain. Behind me, the howling continued, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but always there. They were hunting me, playing with me like cats with a mouse. I stumbled through the darkness for what felt like hours, following dry creek beds and narrow canyons, trying to find a way back to the main trail. Every shadow could hide a predator. Every sound could be the approach of something inhuman. That's when I found the cave. It was hidden behind a curtain of desert willows, barely visible even with my flashlight. The opening was narrow, but it led back into a larger chamber that felt safer than being exposed on the canyon floor. I crawled inside and tried to catch my breath, listening for sounds of pursuit. The cave was larger than I'd expected, with passages leading deeper into the rock. And it wasn't empty. Along the walls, arranged like trophies, were personal belongings from dozens of hikers. Backpacks, hiking boots, cameras, wallets, all the things that people carried into the canyon and never carried out. Some of the items looked recent, others were old and weather-beaten. In the center of the chamber was a circle of stones, and inside the circle were bones. Human bones, picked clean and arranged in careful patterns. This was a feeding ground, a place where the creatures brought their prey to consume them. Among the bones, I found Sarah Martinez's backpack. It was torn and blood-stained, but her ID was still inside. She'd been missing for 2 days, but according to the old woman, it had taken 3 days to transform her, which meant a sound from the cave entrance made me freeze. Slow, deliberate footsteps, coming closer. I turned off my headlamp and pressed myself against the cave wall, trying to become invisible in the darkness. "We know you're in there, child." The old woman's voice echoed through the cave. "This is our sacred place, our feeding ground. You have defiled it with your presence." Light began to glow from the cave entrance, not electric light, but something else, something that seemed to come from the creatures themselves. I could see their silhouettes against the glow, moving with inhuman grace. "Come out, child, accept your fate. Join us willingly, and the transformation will be easier." I looked around desperately for another way out and saw that one of the passages led deeper into the cave system. I had no idea where it went, but it had to be better than facing the creatures in their feeding ground. I crawled into the narrow passage, trying to move silently through the darkness. Behind me, I could hear the creatures entering the main chamber, their claws clicking on the stone floor. "She's gone deeper," the Sarah thing said, her voice barely recognizable. "Into the sacred passages." "Good," the old woman replied. "Let her run. The deeper she goes, the more lost she becomes. These caves connect to the ancient places, the places where our kind have hunted for thousands of years. She will wander in the darkness until hunger and thirst drive her mad, and then she will be ready to accept our gift." I crawled through the narrow passage for what felt like hours, following branching tunnels that led ever deeper into the heart of the canyon. Some passages were so narrow I had to belly crawl through them. Others opened into vast chambers that my headlamp couldn't fully illuminate. And everywhere, scratched into the stone walls, were symbols, ancient petroglyphs that seemed to writhe and move in the shifting light. Images of humans transforming into animals, of creatures with too many teeth and eyes that burned like stars. This place was old, older than the park, older than the settlements, older than recorded history. The creatures that hunted me weren't just individual monsters. They were part of something larger, something that had been feeding in these canyons since before humans learned to write. I finally emerged from the cave system through a hidden entrance near the Colorado River, miles from where I'd started. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn, and I'd never been so grateful to see the sun. But I wasn't safe yet. As I stumbled along the riverbank looking for a way back to the main trail, I could hear them following. Howls echoing off the canyon walls, growing closer with each passing minute. I found a ranger emergency cache near Hermit Rapids and used the emergency radio inside to call for backup. The signal was weak, but I managed to get through to the dispatch center. "This is Ranger Williams. I need immediate helicopter evacuation from Hermit Rapids. Multiple casualties, dangerous wildlife situation." "Roger, Ranger Williams. Helicopter en route, ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I had to survive 20 more minutes. The howling was getting closer, and I could see shapes moving along the canyon walls above me. The creatures were faster in their animal forms, but they seemed to be staying in the shadows, avoiding the growing daylight. I found a defensive position among some large boulders near the river and waited. The sound of the helicopter was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard, the steady thrum of rotors echoing off the canyon walls, drowning out the inhuman howls of my pursuers. The pilot was a veteran named Mike Rodriguez, who'd flown rescue missions in these canyons for 15 years. As the helicopter settled onto a small beach near the rapids, I ran for it, expecting to feel claws raking across my back at any moment. "Where's the casualty?" Mike shouted over the rotor noise. "Gone," I said, climbing into the passenger compartment. "Just get us out of here." As we lifted off, I looked down at the canyon floor and saw them. 3 large coyotes sitting on a rock outcropping, watching the helicopter rise toward the rim. Even at that distance, I could see their eyes glowing in the morning light. The official report listed Sarah Martinez as presumed dead due to a fall from the Hermit Trail. Her body was never found, despite extensive searches. The area around Hermit Creek was temporarily closed for wildlife management, but it reopened a month later with additional warning signs about coyote activity. I never told anyone what really happened down there. Who would believe a story about shape-shifting witches and ancient feeding grounds? I was a park ranger, a professional, someone who dealt in facts and evidence. But I know the truth. Sarah Martinez is still down there, somewhere in the depths of the Grand Canyon. She's not dead. She's something else now, something that hunts in the darkness and feeds on human flesh. And she's not alone. Joseph Yazzie retired 2 weeks after my encounter. On his last day, he pulled me aside and handed me a small leather pouch. "White sage and cedar," he said. "Burn it if you ever smell them coming. It won't kill them, but it might give you a chance to run." "Joseph, what are they really?" He looked out at the canyon, his weathered face grave. "They are the price of forgetting the old ways, of thinking we can tame the wild places. They are hunger given form, predators that have learned to wear human faces." "How many are there?" "More every year. Every hiker who goes missing, every camper who vanishes without a trace. Some of them become part of the pack. They're patient, these old ones. They can wait decades between hunts if they have to." I transferred to a different park 6 months later, but it didn't matter. The nightmares followed me, and sometimes on quiet nights I swear I can hear howling in the distance. It's probably just regular coyotes, but I keep Joseph's pouch of sage close by, just in case. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from my replacement at Grand Canyon. Another missing hiker, another search that turned up nothing but torn clothing and strange tracks. The new ranger, a young woman named Lisa Chen, asked if I had any advice for searching the Hermit Creek area. "Stay on the main trails," I told her. "Travel in groups, and whatever you do, don't camp alone near the river." "Any particular reason?" I thought about telling her the truth, about warning her the way Joseph had warned me, but she sounded so young, so confident in her training and equipment. She wouldn't believe me any more than I'd believed Joseph. "Just be careful," I said. "The canyon keeps its secrets, and some of them have teeth." She laughed. "You sound like the old-timers talking about spirits and monsters." "Don't worry. I can handle whatever wildlife is out there." I hung up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just sent another lamb to the slaughter. The creatures are still down there, still hunting, still adding to their pack. And every full moon when the howling echoes through the canyon, I know they're feeding. The Grand Canyon is one of the most beautiful places on Earth, but it's also one of the most dangerous. Not because of the cliffs or the heat or the wild animals that everyone knows about. It's dangerous because of the things that wear human faces until they're ready to hunt. The things that have been stalking these ancient rocks since before humans learned to fear the dark. Sarah Martinez is still down there, somewhere in the depths of the canyon, and she's always hungry, always hunting, always waiting for the next hiker to wander off the trail and into her territory. The canyon keeps its secrets, but sometimes, if you listen carefully to the wind blowing through the rocks, you can hear them calling. Calling for help, calling for rescue, calling for someone to join them in their eternal hunt. Don't listen. Don't follow the voices. And whatever you do, don't hike alone.